trusting AI in healthcare. Artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think and act like humans. It has become a significant player in our lives. Does it bypass human flaws, or does it create more problems? The presenters, who are Felix, Avadis, Sergey, David, and Ashot, will focus on the trust issues of the application of artificial intelligence in healthcare. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Hey everyone. I think we have a technical issue. Dativ, can you give me permission to share the screen, please? For some reason, it turned off again.
Can you do it now?
Let me check. Yes, thank you. Give me a second. Yes. Okay. So we already touched upon some of the topics that was already discussed. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Inans. Now we're going to talk about like AI technologies that are becoming ever more present in modern businesses and everyday life, and thus transitioning into being applied into healthcare as well, thus raising a sort of relationship of trust and an issue in that. So, but before I get to that, I want to introduce my very trusty group members, which is myself, Ashot, David, Felix, and Sergey. Well, when artificial intelligence is applied to healthcare, it has like a potential to assist many healthcare providers to in many aspects of patient care and administrative processes. However, many have shifted their intention on the factor of like technology that is deciding human health and safety with no human factor or perspective being included, and like what those consequences could lead to. So some of these concerns are like, as we talked about, risk of bias, lack of clarity for the AI algorithm, privacy issues, and many other issues. So for now, I will shift the virtual stage to my colleague Ashot, who will continue to talk about the risk and like trust factors in this situation.
Yes, hi everybody. Today, as Avadis mentioned, going to be talking about issues and their consequences. So first of all, it's important to understand that we're dealing with real life data systems, which are obviously not perfect, which means that there are a lot of spots or points where errors can occur. And in a medical sense, these errors can have serious and even fatal consequences. That is why data integrity is so crucial. If, let's say, the data provided is wrong, or the implemented algorithm is incorrect, or the data is missing, the final result may have a great deviation from the truth. And especially in healthcare, it can have very serious consequences. The second issue is this so-called blind trust, or trust maximization between human AI collaboration and their relationship. When trust is maximized in a human AI relationship, each human stakeholder would necessarily accept each AI recommendation and suggestion, which is not a good practice. Of course, we can certainly claim that AI can outperform human decision-making by taking into account some multifaceted data. However, unnecessarily high trust in AI may have catastrophic consequences, especially in life-critical applications, which is healthcare. Last but not least, when people are always introduced to AI, it's frequently expected that computer-based decision-making would produce more fair and reliable results. However, algorithms are prone to pay more attention to certain factors rather than others. Furthermore, the characteristics of machine learning algorithms run the danger of reflecting underlying data bias, thereby potentially harming members of protected groups based on their gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, etc. For example, as Dr. Inans mentioned in his speech, there's been this research conducted that applied a machine learning model to diagnose skin cancer. And it used less than 5% of data from a dark-skinned patient sample to train its algorithm, thus causing a bias against dark-skinned patients. Biases are coming from professional subjective answers should be discovered and reduced during validation and verification in order to ensure fairness in automation and in AI in general. So in conclusion, the trust factors here depend upon data integrity, the biasness of an algorithm, and knowing the boundary of trust between humans and AI. Now I'm going to give it back to Avadis.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ashot. Now I'll shift my attention to more of the stakeholders in this situation and needing to evaluate their needs and what they need to be implemented a trustee relationship. So as we said, like with the advent of modern technologies and artificial intelligence throughout the past decades, a significant amount of like performed tasks have become more automated. So this lets more people focus their attention, as Ashot mentioned, on the integrity and the trustworthiness of the system. So, and of course, this is a justified perspective, as many people do not know how properly know how this system is working and how it is governed and how it's monitored. And even if it's being governed or monitored, they don't have this knowledge. So this ends up like introducing a wide range of factors to be taken into account for like every key player to have like a trustee environment. So the initial step here is to identify like who are the loud majority of the stakeholders, which is, and like the most crucial stakeholders, which is the public and the patients. So as we are discussing the impact of AI, of AI in the field of healthcare, like obviously the patients are going to be the most concerned key players in this situation. So it is key to mention that in every different state of the level, this trust varies. So now I will give it to David, who will continue to talk about this further and other like key players in this situation.
Thank you for that, Avadis. According to a study from IPSOS, which is a market research and consulting firm in countries such as China, the level of trust is high. However, in Western countries, this statistic doesn't reflect in the same way. It is important that this is important to establish that this is due to countries such as China having a technology field that is almost fully controlled by the government, and many of the residents, of course, they solely trust AI as they trust their government. In Western countries, however, it's different. So there was a study done to determine what practices and principles are important for citizens in Western nations to trust in AI. Here you can see some of them: the data privacy, transparency, literacy, etc. And the majority of the people find it necessary for all of these factors to be present and ensured in order to have a trustworthy environment. And the main responsibility of like everything working together in AI falls on the shoulders of the developers. The machine learning algorithm needs to be carefully written to take into account any loopholes that might cause problems for the patients and doctors using it. On top of that, the data that's fed into the algorithm needs to be carefully filtered to get rid of all possible unfair biases that might be caused by an analysis of a data set that doesn't have an equal or accurate distribution of labels. As opposed to traditional computer programs, the machine learning software does not have an additional layer of abstraction between the user and the program, as the way it operates is way less straightforward. Therefore, we need proper documentation to maintain the AI programs, as well as make them more accessible to non-professionals dealing with them in order to provide more transparency. Even though patients make up the majority, we should not overlook doctors and nurses, who are the ones that are regulating the system. It also goes without saying that nurses should obtain technical knowledge on how the system works in order to provide agency and governance to the patient. Now, Sergey will continue.
Yeah, thank you, David John. So as David mentioned, one of the biggest reasons why people distrust AI is the fact that people actually do not quite understand how they work. And there are very many layers of abstraction between the user and the algorithm, making it seem overly complicated and alien to any non-expert having to deal with it, especially when said algorithm affects people's health and livelihood. Sorry. Small confusion. So one of the best ways to mitigate the issue is to make the program more accessible to general population, especially the doctors dealing with it. Usually documentation and information about AI is extremely scientific and code-related. However, if said documentation becomes easier to understand, people would be much more likely to trust AI to deal with healthcare. All that we would need an oversimplified explanation of how the program works.
Yeah, so as Sergey said, we would basically need something like an open source repository of all necessary information that's needed to understand how an AI would work, since we cannot exactly provide since most solutions would require a technical advancement in the AI field. The only solutions that we can offer from our perspective would be practical solutions that do not involve any kind of technological advancement in AI. So the best, one of the easiest ways to do that would be to implement simple documentation and perhaps training sessions for any stakeholders, for example, for the patients and for the doctors to understand what is it exactly that they're dealing with.
So another way to make AI less confusing and overwhelming for people who do not necessarily possess the knowledge required to understand how an AI operates, we could hire a third person in the equation. The mediator, the doctors and healthcare workers should not involve themselves in the operation of the program and instead focus on what is most important, the lives of their patients.
Yeah, and the best way to deal with that would be to introduce a kind of a human face to the AI algorithm that the people will be dealing with on a daily basis. Since, as it was mentioned in one of slides with David, it would be people would be trusting AI much better if there was human interaction involved in that. And the best way to do that would be to hire some kind of AI expert who would be there who would be there to explain anything that would be going on, or there to solve any question or any issue that would arise with the AI that would be working on everything within healthcare.
And on top of all that, we could add another layer of security and trust by not giving the AI to ability make decisions on its own, and instead having a doctor or any other healthcare expert who will confirm every decision that AI will take. So while this would lower the effectiveness of the program, it would make it much more trustworthy, as we essentially transform the AI from a full-fledged program to an assistant for a doctor.
Yeah, so as Sergey said, this is not exactly a complete solution for the issue, since it would, instead of raising the trust for an AI, it would instead bypass the need for trusting an AI, since instead of having the AI make the actual decision, which is the reason why people distrust it, we would have a doctor basically flip through every single possible decision that the AI could have made and then actually make the final decision. In this case, it would not be, as I said, it would not be a full solution. However, it is an implementation that we could go for to implement AI, although not completely, but in some minimal ways to, go step by step and reach towards final implementation of AI.
Yes, so thank you for listening all. Of course, what we presented here is very narrowed down to this specific field of healthcare, but we believe when we when a plan like this is implemented in the future, which is of course documented and wanted by many other institutions to be done by, it would improve not only the system of AI, like the trustworthiness of AI itself, but like the trust humans have in AI as well. So yeah, thank you. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead.
Can we close the PowerPoint share?
I'm sorry, we're having a hard time hearing you. Could you repeat that?
Or maybe write it as a question, chat it in chat. Would that be possible? Because the connection is very difficult at this point.
Parking presentation.
Okay. Is anyone have any?
Chat image direct for the chat dışarı aspahin kuhansum dönemleri.
I'm guessing. So if anyone else has any questions, please go ahead and type in chat or just raise your hand. We would be happy to answer them.
I have a question, gentlemen. What is the factor of how important it is to have the AI in our homes, start using it in parts at our home that will allow us to trust it outside in the hospital, for example. I mean, is that a factor or it's irrelevant to that? It has to do with the importance of the situation. So, you know, an operation is much more important than maybe a security system at home.
Yeah, well, we didn't find, there wasn't any data relating to that exactly that we could find, but since pretty much you could say that there are some similarities between the AI that we would be dealing with in our homes and you know, the house. The more accustomed people are to AI, I'm pretty sure it would help build some trust, because as we could see, it's pretty apparent that the trust in AI has grown ever since, you know, it has been implemented more and more in our daily lives. So I think it could help, since it does grow over time.
Because we have currently Alexa and similar devices that are like live-in thinking beings in the house, right? And they take some initiatives with things, and maybe eventually can give warnings relating to health. And I'm wondering how all these things link together. You know? That because there is a familiarity.
That's actually a thing that is actually happening even now, because I mean, not Alexa necessarily, but there are some other you know, personal apps that use AI that actually give you some advice on healthcare, for example, or I don't know, body health, or, you know, they tell you how to keep your diet, or when to go for a run, or if you have, I don't know, there have been cases, for example, with the Apple Watch, where the AI and the watch could have detected that the heart rhythm was actually abnormal, and the user of the Apple Watch had a heart disease, and they checked it out, and it was actually the case.
For me personally, that would be a huge trust builder. If that happened to me, that would be a huge test. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.